So a really warm welcome back to your primary care network development modules and to this, our seventh short module. Today we'll be focusing on managing time, which really links to the conversations we've already had on leading for personal well-being, but merits its own focus. We've probably never all felt so pressured, so stretched, so drawn. An opportunity then to rethink and refocus on how we manage our time well. And of course, we might acknowledge that time is in some ways the most equal of all the resources. We all have 24 hours in every day and 7 days a week, setting aside lifespan, of course, but it is also true that some people do seem to be better able to manage their time. So the first thing to think about is, what does better able mean to you? What does it look like to manage time well? How do you measure that yourself? There are different ways of thinking about it, and it is important to think for yourself and to make a choice. Are we, as some would argue, all becoming internalized capitalists and thinking about time as being well managed in relation to productivity and efficiency? So is it that the more we get done, the better we're managing our time? In fact, you could say that in many ways we admire busyness, and in fact maybe even draw a sense of status or significance from having too much to do. You know, the busy person who rushes late into an online meeting or who just manages it on time can often feel a sense of significance, a sense of status, which is a perspective on managing time well. Is that your view? If it is, then it leads to a particular set of approaches to managing time. Is your view potentially that the quality of your lifestyle and the experience that you have is much more of an indicator of how well you're managing your time? There are differences, of course, along those continua. So the reason that we talk about work-life balance, of course, is because there's a view of work and life being at different ends of a seesaw. But actually, we might, as professionals, think differently about that. Work might be a great source of our own well-being. So it might be less about how we can do less work and create more time for the rest of our lives. It might be more how we can work well to live well. So please start this module thinking about those things, because I'd like to offer you a very provocative quote by Lee Iacocca, who was one of the Ford Motor Industry's foremost designers. Your diary knows what matters to you. To you. A couple of things here. It does really help to look at your diary, to notice where you're spending your time. And I'll come back to what I mean by look at your diary, because I don't only mean take a view of how you're in one meeting and then another meeting. I actually mean something different by that. But I'll pick it up in a little while. But the point behind this is really that your time, the way that you invest and spend your time, the way that you are on a day-to-day basis is really not so much only an indicator of the way that you manage your diary. It's actually about how you manage your life. I can remember when I was much younger, I was frequently late socially rather than professionally. And I can remember a very dear friend turning to me and saying, with every minute that I sit waiting for you, my life is draining away. Now, he was and is still a very expressive character, and he has a point, doesn't he? We tend not to think of managing time as how we manage our lives, but let's frame it like that, because it can often make a difference to the degree of rigor and determination that we bring to bear in how we manage what we might otherwise think of as being time. So, four big areas for action. One, prioritizing how you do that. Do you do that? Two, holding your boundaries. 3, as you can see, saying no, which is linked to but distinct from holding your boundaries. And 4, reducing time wasters, which is where I'll come back to what I said about looking at your diary. So let's have a look at the 4 practical things that you might like to either enhance in your approach or potentially begin in your approach. A very simple model of priorities then, and you'll find this in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the urgency important matrix. You may well be familiar with this, but this short module isn't about what you know, it's about what you do. So let's recap this. Activities can be important, really very significant. They will make a difference to your experience, to others' experience, to the impact, to the outcomes. Urgent, issues that are time focused and time pressured. Now, there are then distinctions. Things can be both important and urgent. So that is an indicator of priority. Things can be not very important, but still urgent. And we might then want to either pass them on to other colleagues if we can, or be a little bit more scrupulous about how generous we are with our time and our creativity. Again, I'll come back to that point. Tasks or activities can not be urgent, but be very important. These often get drowned out, by the way. The things that we care most about are often the things that we give least of our time to, and therefore these are the activities that do need incremental and regular planning. And things can be not terribly urgent and not terribly important, and so possible that we might eliminate them or ignore them or put them to one side, recognizing that they don't right now merit our investment of time, attention, emotion, and energy. One thing that I would really encourage you to do is to spend and focus and choose to invest your time in the figure of 8 between 1 and 2 here. Activities that are immediate and are important, and activities or interests that do require you to nurture, you to invest, you to therefore plan some time. But maybe even think about where you spend your time right now. Priorities are what matter most. And I think what can happen is when we're very busy, we simply stop prioritizing and we become pressure prompted. And what I mean by that is act on the basis of what is in front of us right now. And I'd really encourage you to use this short module to take stock and to notice the pattern of time management that you might have developed over the course of recent years for good reason, because it's an opportunity to not just take stock, but actually restart, and to use this short module as an opportunity to intentionally manage your time differently would be a very positive step to take beyond watching this short video. So do you prioritize? If you do, how do you prioritize? Do you actually then live according to your priorities and choose to invest your time according to your priorities? Because simply having priorities won't change anything. And that's why the second item of holding your boundaries is so important. I'd like to introduce you to the 3 elements of managing any activity well and thoughtfully. First, there's an issue of how much and how well we approach it. Second, and related to that, there's an issue of how much money or time we're going to invest in it. But for the purpose of this model today, let's use this notion of cost as meaning money, and separately, therefore, the item time. So I can invest endless hours at a great financial cost, and therefore inevitably a great cost of time, into producing something of high quality. If the quality doesn't need to be so high, then I might invest less money and less time. But this is the point about boundaries. How much time and how much money and how much care we invest depends on how much that activity matters. Is that how you approach the boundaries around quality, cost, and time for your work? Or are you now in a pattern in which everything matters as much as everything else, and therefore there is no discretion, there is no discernment? It's simply a question of getting through things. It may well be that if something, if we can take the slide set back a moment, isn't urgent and isn't important, that we might still do it, but do it in less time and at less cost, albeit at less quality, but it may be good enough for the work that's required or the outcome that's required. And of course, then holding your boundaries isn't only a question of time, it's also a question of quality. How easily able are you to offer colleagues moderate work, sufficiently good work, rather than consummate quality work? These are important aspects because different personalities, and we'll say a little bit about this in a moment, find holding boundaries challenging or easy for various different reasons. So please be thinking about what this model means to you. Are you able to discern which work requires your quality and therefore invest appropriate cost and time? Or are you investing the same amount of concern and care into everything? And so you may have priorities, but you may not work as if you have those priorities. And part and parcel of having a priority is, of course, being able to say no. And I'd like to mention a book called Markings by a previous UN Secretary General called Dag Hammarskjöld. And he wrote a daily reflection on his leadership. And one entry went along the following lines. Today I said yes. And saying yes makes every difference, because it now means I can offer and emphasize a purposeful no. I don't have to do everything to be effective, to be present, to be available all the time. I have to do the things that matter most. I need to be able to say no, because if I can't say no, my yes is worthless and means nothing. This is really important to think about, isn't it? Saying no isn't necessarily being unkind. Saying no isn't necessarily being unprofessional. Of course, there are ways of saying no. I can't achieve that outcome by Friday. I can, though, create a part approach to the outcome, or I can achieve what we're after by next Wednesday. But put that to one side. Having the confidence, the courage, and the clarity to know what needs your time, your effort, your investment more must mean that you have to say no to some things that come your way. And of course, I mentioned personality earlier, and some aspects of our own personality, particularly if anybody watching has what we might describe a helping personality, which I would imagine we would, I know I do, then time management can be particularly challenging. And there are three facets of personality that do make time management particularly challenging. Perfectionism, wanting everything to be of the highest possible quality. People pleasing, wanting to do what matters to others, needing to be liked, needing to feel the acknowledgement of others' affection and respect. Means that we can often become far too active, far too busy in a range of activities that truly are the responsibility of other people rather than ourselves. And so we muddy the boundaries with people pleasing. And linked to this, heroism, actually being addicted, needing to be seen as being useful. The saviour syndrome, in fact, it's often called in healthcare. So please be honest with yourself. If any of these are aspects of your own personality that you recognise, then please be kind to yourself. The perfectionist needs to learn to pursue the possible, because the pursuit of the perfect prevents the possible. A great phrase is good enough. The people pleaser needs to learn to be able to say, who am I not helping by needing to be liked by everybody? And the hero needs to be able to say, what can I do that's reasonable, as opposed to what would demonstrate my consummate abilities to everybody. So some thoughts and reflections for you to be thinking about. But whilst you're thinking about those, the fourth and final area for us to think about is Leah Iacocca and Your Diary Knows What Matters to you. The perspective I'd like to offer you on this is to reduce time wasters. It is genuinely very, very helpful, possibly every year, maybe every 9 months or so, to take an observer view of your diary and to notice how you spend your time. But what I mean by this is not only to notice what's written in your diary, although that is actually a very sobering thing to notice. Could you, for example, be spending less time in meetings? What difference would it make if you spent 5 minutes less in every meeting and scheduled your meetings to be 5 minutes less, for example? Just noticing how you spend your time can open up possibilities like that. But it's not only what's written, it's also to keep a time log of what you actually do in your days, because what you might notice is that you're spending an inordinate amount of time trying to find materials or papers. It might mean that you recognize that your inbox isn't organized, that your paperwork isn't organized. It might then help you to manage your time into the future if you can create a little bit more structure and system in the way that you store and retrieve information. That's just an illustration. It could be that there are many other things, including people actually, who you notice are gobbling up your time. But we have to notice these things and see them as potential time wasters in order to take any action on them. And one thing to bear in mind here is the difference between what's called maintenance and discretionary time. The idea here is, when you're observing your diary, to make a note of all the things that you're doing because you have to do them. And to distinguish between the time that you spend that's maintenance time and the time that you have available at work that's then discretionary time. Because for many, many people, it's a shock to recognize how much of things we absolutely have to do, and how little discretionary time. A colleague I was speaking to recently was 93% maintenance time and only 7% discretionary time. If you can do anything to reduce the maintenance time, you will feel that you have more autonomy. And autonomy, as we know, is so important to feel that you're living a productive, effective, efficient, and fruitful professional life. So worth thinking about the balance for yourself. Just in finishing, there is a complete reframe of time management that was introduced in an article called Manage Your Energy, Not Your Time, The Corporate Athlete by Tony Schwartz. Really worth looking up if you're able. Because he talks about the fact that, as well as doing whatever we can to better manage our time, it is also really worthwhile thinking about energy and how we maintain our energy and what depletes our energy and what builds that. Because it is actually true, and I'm sure we all know this, that activities that we think will take a long time may not, depending on our mood. And sometimes we have energy for a part of our work and less energy for another part of our work. So very frequently, it may well be that managing time is only one perspective, but focusing on how you can actually replenish your energy is going to boost your efficiency, productivity, if that's what matters to you. You'll spend less time, in other words, on complex, challenging activities if you boost your energy, because how your energy is managed influences how long activities take you. And so Tony Schwartz and colleagues recommend that every day we give time to 4 areas that are well known to influence our sense of energy. First, emotional energy, how to manage your mood. They suggest, for example, here, offering colleagues acknowledgement, because the kinder we are with our colleagues, the more it boosts our own energy. They suggest, for example, a gratitude journal, useful now, as I think we might have suggested in the wellbeing module, to give attention to the 3 things already today that you're grateful for, and just to notice their impact on your mood. Mental energy, needing to stay interested and focused. And they suggest that a change of focus every 90 minutes is really important for this. So just thinking about something different, just talking with colleagues about something novel, challenging yourself to read or watch a TED talk every day, to keep your mind sprightly. Spiritual energy can be boosted by doing something purposeful for you. And that links back, doesn't it, to priorities. If you do things that matter to you, it's likely to influence your sense of meaning and purpose, which is, for our purposes, what I'm meaning by spiritual. And the physical, of course, is much better known. Most of us, when we're wanting to manage our energy or our well-being, do turn to the physical. And of course, that's important to remember, the 30 minutes exercise 5 times a week. But I do think that often what we don't do to manage our energy is really give considered and conscious attention to the emotional, to the mental, and to the spiritual energies that really do influence not only our well-being, but our ability to thoughtfully and carefully manage our time. So some thoughts for you there, which conclude our short series of 7 modules. I do hope that these have been worthwhile for you to watch, and I really want to wish you well in the short and the long term. Thank you very much for visiting the site and for watching these videos.